Good day and welcome to this week's ENCA Live debate. I'm Trudy Makaya.
Well, a very good afternoon to you as well. I'm Gareth Edwards. Throughout this afternoon, you're able to get your comments on what is taxi economics. Really, we want to get behind what drives the taxi industry, but of course, we get to ask the important people the questions. Here's the trick though, you get to send them through to us. You can do that by getting hold of us on Twitter. The Twitter handle at ENCA News. Use the hashtag ENCA Live. I'll pick that up and hand it over to Trudy, who will put it to our guests for this afternoon's show.
And this week we look at the taxi industry. Now, transport is the lifeblood of any economy. In South Africa, about 60% of all adults use minibus taxis to get around. As one of our guests this afternoon put it, the minibus taxi industry is the servant of the urban poor. But yet, this industry often makes profits at the cost of human life. So we're trying to get behind the industry to understand what is it that drives violence in this industry? How do we regulate it better? And also just an understanding of how does it work? How do people make money in this industry? And is that possibly the reason that drives some of the behaviors that we see on our roads? Now, to help us to think through these issues, we have Mr. Siyabulela Fobosi, who is a researcher who's written a few papers on this industry. We're also pleased to have Mr. Philip Taibosh, who is the National President for the South African Taxi Council, National Taxi Council, SANTACO. You can read their impressive bios on enca.com. Now, you've just heard me reference that statistic of 60% of all adults using minibus taxis on our roads. And I'm going to put it to both of you. What is the contribution of the minibus taxi industry to this economy? And do we undervalue the important role that it plays? I'll start with you, Siyabulela.
Thank you for that question. Well, to start off, we need to understand that the taxi industry plays a very big role in the broader economy, in a sense that it transports people, firstly. It creates linkages, if I may put it that way, between the formal sector and the informal sector. So it transports people from the townships, from the informal settlements, to towns, to the city center. So in that sense, creating those linkages between the formal sector and the informal sector. So, and it also employs quite a huge number of people, the drivers, the taxi marshals, to the people in the taxi ranks. So it does play a huge role in the broader economy, in the sense that it does create linkages between the formal and informal sector, and it also transports people to the city center and employs quite a huge number of people. For example, there's I think there's around 180,000 people employed, if I'm not mistaken. So, but you cannot really count the number of people employed in the taxi industry because of its nature, because of its informal nature, because you cannot say, okay, this is the total number of people employed. Because today you would employ a taxi driver and then you'd leave the following week. So that's the nature of the taxi industry. It's very dynamic. It's very hard to understand and say, okay, this is how, this is the number of people employed in the taxi industry.
But these are impressive numbers. I mean, 180,000 possibly are employed. We also have a statistic of 15 billion rand spent on petrol, just to give a sense of the size of this industry. Mr. Taibosh, do you think we understand as the South African public exactly how important this industry is?
I think South Africans understand how important this industry is. The only thing we should ask, does government understand how important the taxi industry is? And if government says they understand, why is there problems of violence within the industry? And I'm putting this not to shifting the blame. I'm trying to say that if we finished negotiating in 1996 on the National Task Team, Taxi Task Team, when Mr. Meka Maharaj was still the minister, why should we still have the problems which were there before 1994? And the EG I'm going to give you is that you go to all the other provinces in the country. You will not find taxi people fighting because of the major numbers of pirate people, the illegal taxis which you are referring to. But when you come here in Gauteng, that's where you find the problem. And you would find that Gauteng looks like a country within a country, because the way they are operating, it seems as if they are just making their own laws. For instance, in Gauteng, as I'm set it here, we know that Gauteng possesses close to about 63,000 taxi operators, and of which, out of the 63,000, close to about 31,000 doesn't have operating licenses.
Okay.
Now, you are talking about 31,000 doesn't have operating licenses. They are waiting for their operating license. And remember, we are talking about people who have surrendered their legal permits, which they received from government in the previous dispensation, and which was also acknowledged in the new dispensation. Now, these people were requested by government to say, let us assist you in making you business people. Instead of being permitted to do business, you must be licensed to do business. Hence the issue of the operating licenses.
Can I stop you there, Mr. Taibosh? I mean, I suppose you also started in the industry as a taxi owner. Maybe let's take this a step back to explain to our audience. Let's say I'm Trudy Mackay and I want to run a taxi. I buy my combi. What do I need to do to enter this industry? What's the next step? I've got my taxi. Do I apply for a permit? Do I apply for a route? How does it all work?
Let me put it this way, and this is what we are trying to explain to people. You cannot be a shop owner if you don't have a shop license. So before you buy a vehicle, you had to be an operator, a licensed operator.
Even before I buy the
Before
vehicle?
you buy a vehicle,
Okay.
because why should you buy a vehicle if you are not a taxi operator, if you are not licensed to operate a taxi? Because when you buy a vehicle, you are going into the space which is already occupied by people who have been licensed to operate there. The good thing is that you apply first to become a member of an operating association. And when you become a member of that association, the association will then assist you in applying for you to have an operating license. You don't just go to and this is where I blame the banks and I blame the dealerships, because these guys should have known from the word go that they shouldn't be selling vehicles like copies, especially for transporting people to people who doesn't possess operating licenses or permits.
So the association can turn me away, though?
That's not the end, because what the law says, it says you apply to the operating licensing board.
Okay.
And the operating licensing board will issue with an operating license. Now, the rules are set. It's not easy for an association just to turn you away. It's whether there is need where you reside or where you are going to operate, and the operating license is there to advise the association. In an event the association doesn't want to accept you, then the law says that you can be registered as a non-member, because the association make it impossible for you to trade as a taxi operator. So, with other words, I'm saying with an association and without an association, you can still become a legal taxi operator.
Okay. Now, let's say I have my license as an operator. Suppose I also have to employ taxi drivers. And this seems to be a bit of a difficult subject. I'm going to come to you, Siyabulela, in terms of do I give them a contract? Do I sign them up with UIF? Is that the accepted process? And does that happen?
Well, based on my research, if you look in the taxi industry, when it comes to the labor process, for example, the way work is organized in the taxi industry, firstly, there is no employment contract in some taxi owners. They don't have employment contract for their taxi drivers. And they don't work ordinary working hours. So it's stipulated in the Labor Relations Act and the Basic Conditions of Employment Act. So hence it's very difficult for the Department of Labor to go and enforce the sectoral determination in the tax industry, because some of the taxi drivers they don't stay in the tax industry. They are there for a short time. It's just for a short time to wait and probably go and join another company. So it's very difficult for the Department of Labor to enforce sectoral determination there, given the nature of the tax industry and given how the relationship between the taxi driver and the taxi owner. Because sometimes you find that the taxi driver has control on how he or she runs the business, on where he goes and how he conducts and who he collects in which passengers, you know. So that's how difficult the tax industry is.
So the
it's
worker
very
is always
dynamic.
under pressure, in a sense,
In
to
a
always
sense,
be
yes, in a
delivering, I
sense.
suppose, people.
So I think that's why you'd find that they drive in the way they drive, because they are under pressure. The employers and sometimes would say, look, I need this amount per day, and you get paid on commission. So they work on commission. They don't get paid as what is required by the labor laws. You know. So they work on commission. The employers say, look, I'm going to give you, for example, 25% of what you've given me today. So, but there's no,
irrespective of what it is, so you have to maximize.
Yeah, so there's no employment contract in some taxi owners, but some do abide by the labor laws.
So in a sense, it's almost up to the taxi owner,
yes,
as to how compliant
yes.
they're going to be. You know, there's been a lot of obvious interest in this discussion from our social media, and there have been various comments, and I'd like to bring some of those comments into the discussion. Gareth, what are we hearing?
Oh, it's interesting, just the back of what our guests have been saying so far, particularly that of being SIA. I think we have one coming through. We're just talking about the processes of getting a license, how do they operate, the costs involved. Maybe Mr. Taibosh can weigh in on this as well, sir, if you'd like to. It's from the handle. I love people's Twitter handles. By the way, if you'd like to get hold of us, and ask your questions, you can. Just use hashtag ENCA Live. We'll pick it up here on the show. How much, this is from @Stunkel. Really can't make these names up. How much tax, if any, do they pay? They, I imagine, being the associations. And do they have public liability insurance? That's from @Stunkel on @ENCA News. Gentlemen?
Yeah, thank you very much. First of all is that the issuance department of an operating license, it's government through the operating licensing board. They are the issuance department. And secondly, when it comes to the issue of tax, I don't know how many times have I explained this. You cannot get an operating license if you are not tax compliant, or if you are not cleared by the receiver of revenue. Not a single taxi operator in South Africa doesn't have a tax clearance certificate.
So they're all registered at SARS.
It's part and parcel of becoming a taxi, or of being involved in the taxi industry. You cannot get an operating license if you are not tax registered. You cannot.
But Mr. Taibosh, going forward, say you get your license and your tax registered, you've done everything correctly to get to that point. In your daily operations, the revenue that you're making, the money that you're making every day, do people pay tax on that, especially when it's given in cash?
Look, I think that goes along with even the larger population of South Africa. We are all working. Whether I'm paying tax or I'm exempted from tax, it's another thing. And I'm not sure whether taxi operators, there are those who are exempted. But I know by myself sitting here, I know a lot of my colleagues, I'll say hundreds of thousands of taxi operators in South Africa, who I know that they are tax compliant operators. So, maybe the issue will be how does SARS verify that the numbers which
The
I'm giving
actual
him,
takings, yes.
it's correct or not. And that's where we have come up with an innovation.
Okay, we'd love to
And the
hear more.
innovation we are coming with an EMV cut, which says that for each and every trip which will be undertaken in a taxi, SARS will be able to follow up how much has Taibos earned from this particular taxi today and what is his responsibility towards tax.
So you're taking cash out of the system.
We are moving cash out of the system to make even, not only because of SARS, but also because of safety regulations. If you look at how passengers pay along the route. In the vehicle, they pay the driver. And you can imagine if the driver starts giving his attention to the money, what is happening. Take, half a second away from the road, you are involved in an accident. So I'm saying that on the issue of tax, I wish that people must take this question and put it to SARS, so that SARS must give the numbers, because I can't give the numbers, but I'm saying there is not a single taxi operator, a single legal taxi operator, let me put it that way. There is not a single legal taxi operator in this country who is not tax compliant.
Siyabulela, from your research, has this come up? Do you find tax compliance?
It didn't really come up in the terms of paying tax, but I mean, I did find out from some of the taxi operators and drivers. Some of the operators had used to say that, well, we pay tax, and now the government, with regards to the formalization process, wants us to register employees to for sector determination to abide by the labor laws, and yet we pay this tax, and this is too much to us. So they had that complaint that this formalization process, we're not in agreement with it. So it seems to me then that there seems to be a site of conflict, between the state and within the drivers themselves, within the taxi operators themselves. There's a side of conflict, for example, with regards to the formalization process. From the taxi operators, they say, we're not in agreement with what you're saying, because this is a top-down process. You're not engaging with us, So that's one of the issues they raised. And given that, for example, my study was in the Eastern Cape, so one of the issues some taxi operators raised with regards to Santaco, and I would say, look, Santaco doesn't represent us, Some of the issues we're not involved, So it really is a problem for us, when they say, look, we're representing you in terms of for example, a recapitalization program, and yet we're not benefiting from that. We're not receiving permits. What is Santaco doing? Some of the taxi operators are complaining about that.
Well,
so there seems to be a problem for me. There seems to be a conflict, rather, between the taxi operators and the state, and between taxi operators themselves. For example, those who have operating licenses and those who don't have
It's
operating
almost like taxi driver, you're on your own. Is this
I think
fair?
I think there is we should be making this very this distinction, that there is a difference between a taxi driver and a taxi operator. And a taxi driver is an employee. He is employed by the taxi operator, and I don't think it is new that people are working on commission. You have your labor brokers all over this country. They are paying people on commission. There's nothing wrong with that. There has never been anything wrong with the taxi industry paying people on commission. But what we have said ourselves as a taxi industry is that we must move away from the commission-based payment and ensure that the people who are, for instance, you've got a driver who's been 35 years in the taxi industry. What do you say about the driver when he retires tomorrow? What benefits does he derive? And that's what we are working on. Let me talk to the issue of formalization. I don't think, and I don't agree with Butlene. Busi, on the issue of formalization. Formalization has taken place within the taxi industry. It might be that maybe the real implementation thereof is taking place in different forms.
Okay, so
but
maybe the formalization...
since the birth of Santaco, and you know, again, the question on Eastern Cape, I can tell you that every operator in the Eastern Cape, I can go with you on the ground.
Okay,
you will understand the
that?
impact of Santaco and the work of what Santaco doing on operators on the ground.
Mr. Taibosh, we'll come back to the Eastern Cape. We're just going to take a 2-minute break. We're going to re-engage with our Twitter feed and our Facebook, and then we're going to get into the issue of the Eastern Cape and also just the taxi industry in general and its operations, because this is a fascinating discussion. We'll be back in 2 minutes.
With so many taxis around, it takes a special touch to set them apart.
We like to use war metaphor in the business world, taking out competitors, lining the truths behind business strategy, conquering the market. But in the taxi industry, these are no mere figures of speech.
People have been killed in taxi violence in Boksburg.
A taxi boss was shot and killed in Intuzuma in Durban.
Accusations of unfair play in the taxi industry saw bullets flying in the Pretoria CBD. Officials say 2 shots were fired by 2 men who then fled the scene. Fighting ensued between members of the Tembisa and Olivino Bosch taxi associations. Both say they have routes to ferry commuters from Pretoria to Tembisa and accuse each other of poaching customers.
Only meters away from these houses, a fatal ambush. 3 men were sitting in this car when they came under attack from assailants, armed with assault rifles.
They came under attack from unknown occupants who arrived on a black car. They subsequently alighted and opened fire from both sides of the car, fatally wounding 1 person, seriously injuring the other 2 occupants who were rushed to hospital.
Stembiso Sitole, a local taxi boss and former SANDF member, was killed.
Gunned down and left for dead. This latest incident has highlighted the problem of taxi violence in KZN and brings to 30 the number of lives snatched by taxi violence in Ladysmith so far this year.
Formalization is an important issue in the taxi industry. There have been many initiatives, the taxi recapitalization program being among some of them, that have tried to move this industry from the informal sector to the formal sector. But this is a question that I'd like to ask our guests. Where is the taxi industry situated in the economy? Is it really in the informal sector as we think of it? What are the linkages of the industry to the formal economy? And why is this formalization process so fraught? There was talk of the Eastern Cape and how that process has played out, and the taxi drivers, the taxi operators sometimes feeling that government is not talking to them, and even their representatives in the form of Santaco not talking to them. Mr. Taibosh, let's get back to that. If we went to the Eastern Cape, you say that we would find that there are no issues.
Not that there are no issues. I've said that if you go to the Eastern Cape, including all the other provinces in South Africa, you will find that Santaco is on the ground. Santaco is with the people. Santaco is with the issues of the taxi operators. Hence, we can be able to indicate to you what are the challenges in each and every province, in each and every 81 of the regions which we are having in the country. we will tell you.
But are you speaking the language of the taxi operators if they feel so
I'm a taxi operator.
distant?
I'm a taxi operator. I live and I sleep taxis. And I'm talking. You see, what I cannot attest to or what I cannot try to say it's not true, it's what the researchers and consultants are talking to the taxi operators. Because for me, researchers and consultants, it's for business purposes, it's to find loopholes. I think if Butle was sitting here and he was saying that these are the things which are taking place in the taxi industry, and here are the things, I've gone to Santaco, I've had meetings with Santaco. As I'm sitting to you, we've got a very operational business arm, which is called Taxi the country, which is doing exceptionally well on behalf of the taxi operators. When it comes to the issue of formalization, I'm not sure what what the question is around formalization. We had 34 taxi mother bodies in this country. We had the so-called national bodies. There were 3. It was SATACO, it was the PROTACOs, Provincial Taxi Councils, it was the National Taxi Alliance. All these bodies converged through the intervention of government, converged in Durban in 2001, and a formalized structure was put in place, which is Santaco, by all these organizations.
So in your view, the industry is formalized?
The industry is not fully formalized, and I will tell you fully formalized when it comes to what? When it comes to taking care of the spin-offs which are coming into the industry. There are still these haphazard business doings or individual buying instead of coming together and using our muscles to put together the close to about 90 billion rand, which is generated from the taxi industry. And when I'm saying 90 billion rand, I'm including the monies we are paying, we are putting in the banks on a daily basis. If you take those monies, if you take the monies we spend, you will see that those monies goes to the region of about 90 billion rand. So I'm trying to say that the issue on formalization has taken place within the industry. The issue we are busy with, it is to putting business perspective into place within the taxi industry, and I believe that we are on the verge of winning on that. And I want to appreciate really the government, the role government played in the formalization of the taxi industry, and they also on the taxi recapitalization project, which program, which so many people, comes here, and even researchers are saying nothing is happening there. And I'm going to tell you that how many new vehicles do you see on our road? And where do you think those operators are getting their deposits from? They are getting them from very directly from scrapping their old vehicles. And we have seen a huge buy-in into the taxi recapitalization project. I must indicate that we were the first people to highlight that there are things which are not supposed to be, there are things which were supposed to be happening within the taxi recapitalization program, and we believe as a taxi industry that government has reneged somehow along the way. But what we like is that we've got a minister in the Department of Transport, Medipua Peters, who said, listen, there is a need for us to sit down and relook the taxi recapitalization program. So, but to say that nothing is happening with the taxi recapitalization, it can't be true. So the taxi recapitalization program is delivering a lot of progress for the taxi industry, but not enough for everybody to be happy.
We leave it at that just on formalization, but we'd like to go back to some of what viewers are saying on social media. Gareth?
2 very basic obvious questions that are coming through, which, by the way, if you haven't had a chance to yet, thank you for all the comments via Twitter. Facebook, not so much, so let's stay with Twitter for now, shall we? You can tweet us at ENCA News, use the Twitter handle, or you can find Trudy as well on Twitter, or you can use the hashtag ENCA Live. One of the questions, Mr. Tybosh, I'm sure you've heard this one before. Let's get it on record, shall we? And this is from Bongani at Boko_man. Thanks, Bongani. Seeing as petrol prices, here we go, are down, why hasn't the taxi fare come down as well? And go.
This is a very important question. And I think for the benefit of the viewers and for the benefit of the people who are using taxis, because you see, Gareth, you're not using a taxi, you will not understand this. The taxi...
I do.
Sometimes. For the taxi to be on the road, the taxi needs a lot of components. And those components need to be looked after. And as you know, that the taxi industry in South Africa is a self-subsidized industry. We are not getting assistance from anybody. Nobody is assisting the taxi industry. So even the pricing itself, you spoke about the pricing, even the pricing itself, I'm not sure whether the South African public should not be happy with what they are getting from the taxi industry, because for me, they are just getting into the taxi for free because they are not paying for real time in the taxi.
Are you saying the price
How
should be
much
higher?
of the taxi fare, and you're quite right, I don't take a taxi, I do ask the question respectfully, I certainly do to the millions of people that use a taxi every day, Mr. Tybosh, how much of a taxi fare from Johannesburg Central to Sandton, let me just use that as an example because we are in the area, goes to profit, to your drivers, and then to maintenance? Give me the breakdown of what each fare goes to.
Let me indicate this, Gareth, that the taxi operator, let me start first about the drivers. There are two sets of drivers in the taxi industry, those who are working on commission, and of which I've indicated there is nothing wrong with that for anybody to work on commission. And then there are those who are formal employed in the taxi industry who are getting an average salary of close to 3,000 rand per month. And then you have those who are getting commission who are getting between 20 and 25% and 30% commission. It differs from one place to the other. But what goes to the taxi operator, I must indicate to you, and I want to, taxi operators one day to line up and explain how they are making profit out of this. I'm still finding it difficult to say that how do I make profit out of the taxi industry. I think that what is working out, it's how I am trying to manage my life, how a taxi operator tries to manage his life on a daily basis, and that he finds himself sharing with both the commuter and the driver of his vehicle. He is not making money. When a taxi operator begins to make profit out of his vehicle, it's after 5 years. When the vehicle is completely paid off and he is beginning to collect what he used to pay off the taxi and what he will gain in the long run of that particular taxi.
5 years is a long time. And Mr. Tybosh, I hear you. But I suppose the question is, despite all of that, there are times when input prices go down. The oil, the petrol price being important.
Let me come to the
And you
input.
never see any discounting. You never see different prices in different regions, even though the price varies.
The unfortunate part, and you must excuse me because I have to put this forward. It's that I have never heard any media or anybody in South Africa asking the subsidized transport system, subsidized transport in the country. When are they reducing their prices when these things are going up? You had your Gautrain, which is highly subsidized, which has just put up the prices. You had your Patco buses, you had your Rea Vaya buses. They're putting prices every day up. So I'm saying the taxi industry is not, the increase in the taxi industry, it's not petrol-based, it's component-based. All the things which are making the taxi to move on the road. Those are the things which prick the taxi industry to increase its price.
You're essentially asking the public to just understand that prices increase because of inflation.
I want to come to the issue that if the taxi industry was going to go strictly on how the petrol goes up and down, I can tell you would not have one passenger in the taxi. They would have left the taxis, because we were going to remember that the history of this industry is very important that people should understand. When this industry was started, it was an industry which was actually closing on the social responsibilities which was left by the previous government. You remember the Group Areas Act moving. And when the taxi people started this industry, was for the purpose of helping not to make business. And that's where the history of this industry comes. And that's why we are moving. In time, we'll be moving to a situation where South Africa and the public in South Africa should understand that we are in a business and we need to make profit.
We appreciate that, Mr. Taibo. So it's a business, it's a profit. I think perhaps the price issue we'll have to put aside for now, in the sense that...
Can I leave you with this question? Can you ask Pick n Pay? Can you ask Pick n Pay or any other business?
Well, you see,
when are they reducing their price?
They discount when ShopRite reduces their price. But I'd like to move on and just go to another perspective in this industry. And Sia, you've done research here. And we were hoping to have Mbali Ntuli today. Some of you would know Mbali as a DA member of parliament. But her personal history is that she's a taxi owner. She inherited those taxis from her father, who was also a well-known taxi owner and who died as a result of taxi violence. She's carrying on that legacy in this very tough and macho industry. And what I want to understand is, the taxi industry seems to be one of the most untransformed in the country. You don't see many women drivers, you don't see women owners, you don't see white people, you don't see Gareth trying to run a taxi business.
I always give the wrong signal. I always go the wrong way.
Why is it so masculine, and how do we get away from that? Because part of the violence surely must be driven by the fact that it is this industry comprised solely of bulls.
Well, I mean, let me first, before I address your question, I didn't really do research on that. But with regards to the subsidy issue, taxi operators and drivers, they did raise the issue that they don't receive subsidy from government. So that's one of the issues that they raised. Now, coming to that, I think it has to do with the nature of the taxi industry. It has to do with how they see, how people see the taxi industry within the industry
itself. But it's an industry.
So, there are very few women. We can't run away from that. But
even mining, there are women underground now.
Does that mean that you must be discriminated because you are not formed in the right way?
Doesn't mean so.
No,
I don't think so.
Mr.
Taibosh. That's what you're saying. You know, you're saying because we are not formed or we are not operating in a particular way, we cannot be subsidized. That's a question.
My subsidy, the subsidy
no,
issue is a different issue.
No, I was saying the subsidy issue because that's exactly where you came in.
I was trying to
I think we understand that the taxi industry doesn't get a subsidy, and that perhaps puts it at a disadvantage.
But we must put also things into context. You know, we must not assume that these are the things which are happening within the taxi industry, because by assuming you're making a lot of mistakes.
Okay, but where are the women?
The women, let me tell you that the women are there. The women are, maybe. But
they're not drivers, are they drivers?
They're not owners,
they're not
except for the few.
There's probably one or two
owners. Let me come to the issue of the drivers. Let me come to the issue of the drivers. We have never advertised posts saying that we are looking for male drivers. We have never advertised. We are getting people who are voluntarily coming into the industry. And there are women who are voluntarily coming into the industry. There are women drivers. They are not in that big numbers. But those people
that is a hostile industry,
I
violence?
think that the question you are asking here, you are not looking for a response. You are looking for me to continue to say the taxi industry is not hostile. I'm saying the taxi industry has been hostile, and the taxi industry has been improving with time, and that's why today You are even finding that one of our provinces, you go to the KwaZulu-Natal, you find who are in the leadership of the industry. You find that women are in majority in all the regions in KwaZulu-Natal. You go
They're
to the...
in the majority of the regions, right? But they're not
I'm talking about leadership.
Okay.
I'm talking about leadership. You find women in bigger numbers in leadership. You go to a province like the Northwest. You go to the province like the Northern Cape, and you go to a province like Limpopo. You find women within leadership. But I know that it will not change overnight. Yeah. Hence, we have started with programs. And what we have done, we have started with institutions like Women Desk within the taxi industry. Each and every province in South Africa has a Women Desk division. Where are we moving to? We are moving to a situation where we are going to have these women empowering themselves from the Women Desk by ensuring that we do what South Africa did with the government of national unity, that everybody should be represented in the leadership, and that's where we are moving.
Okay, we hear you. We're going to wrap up now, so I'd like to take what you want to talk about, but I'd also add your closing comments just in terms of how do we move forward, because part of the framing of this discussion was around also the violence. So how do we move forward? How do we regulate this better? And any other closing comments you might have? I'll start with you, Siyabulela, and then Mr. Taibosh.
Firstly, I think I would like to speak to the issue of formalization just briefly. You asked a question with regards to where the tax industry is situated. I would like to believe that the tax industry is structurally situated within the informal sector, but it is marked by the contradictory processes of formalization and informalization. That is a fact. So there is formalization taking place that I cannot deny. There's tax recapitalization happening. It has been happening. And there is informalization happening in the tax industry in the sense that some of the taxi drivers, operators, in fact, they are against of the way in which the formalization process is coming. So that's the informalization happening. So, but the formalization and informalization processes are also happening in the formal businesses as well. That we cannot deny.
Okay,
so,
Mr. Taibosh.
So
we have to wrap up. Thank you.
Pussy, I want to extend an invitation to you. Please make time. Come and visit Santakwa and let me give you an opportunity of investigating and of being informed of what is, because you are simply not informed. I think you are not completely not informed about what is going on in the taxi industry. When it comes to the issue of the violence which is taking place within the taxi industry, I must indicate myself as the president of Santakwa, I'm very worried, because we have moved since the formation of Santakwa in 2001 until in 2013. We have never had violence in this industry since 2001 and up to 2013.
So what changed?
And that's a question I'm asking myself. But I've just indicated that if we have stood at the decisions which we have made in 1996 and kept on working on those decisions, for instance, on the formalization of the taxi industry, number one, on ensuring that each and every taxi operator has a legal taxi operating license. If you look into these issues, you would find that where this massive violence is happening, and it has started around 2000 and towards the end of 2013, it's here in Gauteng. That's where you find violence, because now there are intruders, those operators who doesn't have licenses, and the mushrooming of taxi associations. So there are laws which indicates how an association and when should an association be formed. associations have been prohibited because the associations have been found at some stage that they were the cause of violence because people were putting up this association for profit making. Until we agreed at the National Taxi Task Team in 1996 that only those associations which are presently in the precinct should be registered, and those associations should be the ones who are operating. And I'm saying, if in Gauteng, if we can address the issue of the operating licenses, because these people who are demanding this operating license are not asking anything new from the South African government.
Okay, Mr.
Are
Taiwan,
asking something which is theirs, which has been in their hands.
We have to leave it there. It sounds like Santaco and the taxi industry has a lot of work on its hands in terms of trying to understand some of the causes of violence and resolving some of the formalization issues, the regulatory issues. We've heard a lot about the associations, how they form themselves. We've heard about alleged intruders. Perhaps they might have a different perspective. We've heard a lot about this industry that in many ways is in flux. There have been agreements that have been taken in the early 90s throughout until now, and yet we're still seeing some of the same old problems. And the regulatory issue around here seems to be, what is the best model in terms of the taxi industry? What is the best model for taxi owners to operate? What is the best model for employment to occur? What is the best model for compliance? Because we already have, we also have many laws in terms of labor laws, in terms of safety regulations that the industry seems to be having some difficulty in complying with. And so we've heard a very lively debate. I think our panelists have a lot that they will still like to discuss, and we will also continue the conversation on Twitter on #ENCA Live. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you very much. With contradictions.